This is a short teller tutorial of the ATEC LTA-100 TCR. Just like all ATEC TCRs, the machine really has three different sections. It's got the screen, which I like to refer to as the user interface. It has this CAM or customer access module, which facilitates depositing and dispensing notes. And then it also has a vault area. We'll start with the CAM and how we would clear jams there. We'll go to the vault section and we'll finish with the user interface. So the CAM normally has a shutter. That shutter is normally closed. It will open as you do a dispense or you do a deposit, and it will often close after a dispense. To find a jam, this would be very similar to finding a jam anywhere else. There is a sensor status screen, and as you can see on here, if we were to cover a sensor, we will get red dot indications of where that jam is. So in the event of a jam inside the machine, you would get dots on the inside and have an idea of where to look. It doesn't require a key to open the door. It's just magnetic. So you would just pull the door open and that will swing out of the way. Much like a car trunk, there is just a big bar that runs along the bottom of this, and you'll just push up on that and lift the actual CAM cover out of the way. From that point, any of the orange levers are what you would use to open the machine, and you'll see some green levers that we use to close it. So over here on the right-hand side, possibly out of view, is an orange lever that just says upper, and I'm just simply pushing that down, and that enables our entire upper module to slide out. So like all other ATEC TCRs, it does have three build paths, a upper, a middle, and a lower. And what you're looking at here is the actual CAM itself, the customer access module, plus the upper and the lower build paths. So if you did have a jam of money coming out of the machine, you would find that here in the upper. And there are instructions printed on this machine that tells you how to open it. We're just going to start with kind of the easy way. So I'm just pushing this M1, this orange push button or lever to open that up. Now I'm just checking to see if there are any notes in the back of this. This is where notes make the turn to come out of the machine. I can also lift up the B1 lever, and now I can really see almost all of the top build path as it leads to the CAM. To lift the CAM out of the way, I will press A1 down and lift the top of the CAM up, and this shows me the rest of the upper build path. So looking for any notes that might be in here or here, there is one other thing I can do. I can close this as well, and then I can just lift this entire module up, and that gives me access to the last part, which, if you can see that on camera, is this part here. I would also have an opportunity to look into the back of the CAM in this area to see if there are any notes stuck on the way out. And again, there are two paths that it could take, one for notes that are coming out, and one for notes that had been rejected actually on a deposit would come out this other side. So either way, we can look at these last two parts of the upper build path. The middle build path starts at the very front with this clear plastic, and so we would be looking for anything that was stuck in here. Again, we'd have indication on our screen about what was stuck there. The next place to look is inside of our bill validator. So as you open the bill validator using this E1 lift, you would just kind of look through the bill validator and make sure it was okay, and that you don't see any notes or note fragments or possibly even a coin in there. What you would also notice here is there are 4 glass screens, and this is what you would clean in your weekly teller cleaning. So these 2 on the bottom, and there are 2 just like it on the top, and so you would just run a microfiber cloth across all 4 of those glass screens. Closing the BV, you don't want to slam this down, but you do want to make sure it positively clicks, and so press down firmly and make sure that it clicks there. Behind the BV is really the rest of the middle build path that you can see in the machine, and it really does require, a hands and knees approach to get to it. So there's only about a foot of build path to look at after the BV. That's as far as we can go here, although there is one other interesting part, which there is a small coin tray in the CAM module itself, which we can pull out here. And if there were coins or paper clips or even just dirt, you would find that here. And so you just want to tap that out into a garbage bin. That just simply slides and clicks back in. Closing it is really as simple as it was to open. So we'll take a little bit of pressure, and now we're working with the green levers, which are just the kickstands, and so we're letting those relax. We'll take a little bit of pressure off the cam itself and push the kickstand forward, and lastly, we'll close the back, the M1 push. There is no bottom bill path here, so there's absolutely nothing to see at the bottom of the TCR except really for two things. There is a slot at the very front of the machine, and you'll have to trust me on that. It is in this area, very close to the front, and that is where notes transition from the vault section into the upper for either a deposit or a dispense. And there is one other slot at the very back, and those are where notes that go into the reject box, which we'll show you in the vault in a second. So you would want to take a quick look underneath the TCR just to make sure that you don't see anything hanging out there. All right, we're racking the upper module or the upper back in with all of its modules, and now we'll move into the vault section. So again, this door is magnetic, does not require a key. I'm gonna set a block over here so that it stays open for us. You might have single or dual controls. This lock can manage up to 9 different users. Mine is set up for a single. I'll put in my code and turn the clock clockwise. And now I have the ability to open the safe completely. Once the safe is open, you'll have access to the cassettes that are in here, as well as the lower bill path. So we'll talk about that in 1 second. One interesting thing is, if you can see this on camera, so this is an orange lever that says lower. It's over here on the right-hand side. I can push that down, and that will allow me to expose both the lower bill path and the cassettes. It does have a time delay, so if I rack this back in, I would have to wait about 5 to 10 seconds before I could push the button down again. So it's not broken, it's just locked out to make sure that you do lock it in before you close the safe door. So you're looking at the top part of the lower bill path. Very easy to see inside of this. You won't be able to see much as I open the top of it, I don't think. But notes travel along the top of this. They transition down to the bottom, and then they actually are put into the set cassettes or removed from the cassettes that they need to go into. It would be easy to see a note that was stuck in this area here. To go further than this, we actually lift it up the other way, and now what you're looking at is the diverters that actually insert money or remove money from the cassettes and the cassettes themselves. You'll notice that each of the cassettes are a split cassette, and we'll pull one of those out and take a look at that in a second. And then there's also this cassette in the back that's referred to as a multifunction cassette. The purpose of this cassette is to receive notes that are rejected only on dispense. That is its only function, is a reject box for notes rejected on dispense. Any notes that are rejected on deposit will simply come out of the CAM or customer access module and be returned to the teller or user. To look at a cassette, files are manipulated. To look at a cassette, we simply pull one out, and I'll turn that to you. You will need a key to see this cassette, and this would be true of the reject or multifunction cassette as well. So as we open this cassette up, you'll see that it has the possibility to store 2 different denominations. In this case, 5s and 1s. You'll see there are no 1s in here. That's on purpose. I want to show you something on the screen. And 5s as well. And if you did have a note that was stuck in this cassette, the 2 things that you would do would be to twist this knob. You can go either way to try and make a note come out. And ideally, if you did have a note in there, you would attempt to roll it out rather than to pull it out. So pulling it out might tear it and cause a worse problem. Rolling it out, either side, it could be, either way. More difficult to put a note in the out. Okay, 2 cents worth of squeeze on that. So rolling would be preferable to pulling a note out. The last thing that you would check is there's also a back path. It doesn't open very far. But you would want to carefully check in here and make sure that you don't see any notes or note fragments in there. And if you did, you would preferably use the wheel to roll that out rather than trying to grab it and pull it out. To put a cassette back in, you would need to close the back path. The handle will always fold towards the rear of the TCR, and then the handle is back in. To close this lower module and recover the cassettes, you simply hold this green knob up so that it doesn't drop into that detent. Close it completely and rack the lower back into the TCR. One last thing about closing the vault door. ATEC was kind enough to print on the handle itself for us. But in order to close the door, like, you can't just close the handle, you have to push the handle in. It does say push. And so that will allow us to close the vault normally. There is one other issue that can happen. If you don't close it all the way, then you're unable to return the lock back to the lock position. And so that just means that you need to either turn up or turn up and hold so that you can lock it all the way back. So now it's locked and ready for the next person to use. The last part of this is really to take a look at the user interface. And so already on the screen, we see a couple of important things. I should have taken one cassette out. Maybe I'll insert a picture of that in a second. So what you see is the ones cassette is empty. You saw that when we opened that up. There are no notes in there. So an E with a box just means empty. Fives were in the same cassette as the ones, and you see an exclamation point, and then you see a red bar out to the side. The red bar indicates that there are some notes in that cassette. The exclamation point says it's been manipulated. It's not an error, it's just a status, and it really means that the TCR can't be sure of what's in there until you perform an empty and load to count all the notes. So again, not an error, just a status. If there were a cassette that were missing from this machine, it would be a black X in a white box. And what you see here for 10 or for 20s and for 50s and 100s are no manipulated, just green boxes or blue boxes, sorry, that just indicate there's nothing wrong with those. They're not manipulated, and there are notes in it ready to be dispensed. We can see exactly what's in the machine by clicking on this inventory button, and that will give us an exact count of how many notes are in each of those cassettes. There are two other things that we can do here. So there's error recovery, where we could actually click that error recovery button and hit reset device, and it would give us a reset. This is more than likely better to be performed through middleware than on the TCR itself, but sometimes you may not have a choice. And then there's a how-to section, one of my favorites. So under how-to are troubleshooting and tutorials. They're both very similar. I'll give you a quick example. So under tutorials, here is how you would open the door of the TCR. And so this just a quick reminder of how you would open the door. Under troubleshooting, I'll let that run for 1 second. So again, that shows us the door open. And I'll just show you that under troubleshooting, you would get very similar information, though this would tell you how to check the divert bin. And so it's going to show us with the safe door already open, racking out the cassettes and the lower module, opening the lower module, and then removing the reject cassette, which is back in the back. They're even going to be like kind enough to show us how to roll a note out if we had one stuck. All right. The last part of this is the sensor status, which we showed a little bit of that earlier. So I'm just going to stick my hand into the cam and just give you a quick view. Right? If there were notes like stuck in the cam, you can see that it's given us red lights in there to show that there is a problem. So it would show that in any of these other areas if there were a note in there. Lastly, in this section, well, that actually is it. So that is really a quick tutorial of the LTA-100. I guess what we didn't do is talking about turn it on and turn it off. That would be one good thing to do. So behind this customer display, behind the display unit, there's a on-off switch, a rocker switch with a 1 and a 0. That has to be on. in order for the power supply to be on. And there's a round black button. So I'll simulate turning it off. I'm just pressing and holding this round button, and I expect a screen menu to come up that gives me some choices. The only two that I would really use would be to restart the TCR or to shut down if I were going to shut it down for an extended period of time. I'm going to hit cancel. So that is the shutdown. The way that you would start the machine up is when it's off, you would turn the switch to on, and you would press and hold the black button. You would see the possession lights, the teller lights, flash 4 times and then turn solid. Once they turn solid, you can release the round button and the TCR will turn on normally. So it's really important to use the round button to power it on and off rather than just turning it on and off with the switch. When you do that, you're really power failing a Windows machine. So stick to the ideal way, best practice way of pressing and holding the button. Thank you for watching.